Hey guys, Peter here to do a debut record review of Spiritbox, Eternal Blue, out September 17th on Rise Records. This album has 12 tracks, 43 minutes in length, and they are a Canadian metal band. And I'm just going to call them metal band because it's really hard to define them under one genre. And when you listen to this album, you're going to realize that there's just a lot of variations, there's a lot of influences driving the overall experience and execution as far as Spiritbox goes. So metal is good enough to define what they're doing. Now, as far as this record goes, I felt like the album started off perhaps strong and cohesive, really feeling like an album that's going to have a sense of continuity from track to track, that's going to take me on a journey from the first song to the last song, and it's going to be an album that has a lot of playability and that's very dynamic, that's very fluid. It wasn't the case. 3 songs in, you start to feel the walls breaking down a little bit. The consistency starts to dissipate, starts to disappear. The album becomes a little bit more diverse, becomes a little bit more chaotic, and the songs start to take you in different directions, and it's really hard as a listener to find your way through or to understand exactly where you are, where you're going, and how you're going to get there. So it's an album that doesn't have one path, perhaps it has 12 paths, and because of that, it just makes itself be a little bit cumbersome to go from one song to the next because there's a lot of stops and a lot of restarts as far as what you're getting out of these tracks. So the overall construction of the album doesn't help the album as a whole. What holds the album as a whole is the quality of the individual songs themselves. Now, once you get into the soundscape, this is an album that has a rich texture sound. There's an involving aspect that's crisp at times. It's very powerful. It has a lot of emotion, has incredible atmospheres. So these are some of the attributes that stay true across all 12 songs. But what takes you to that point, or what takes you there, or what drives you there, that's always going to be different from track to track. You're always going to get great atmospheres, but the atmosphere is not the same on every single song. You're always going to get a sense of emotion pouring out of the track, but it's not the same emotion on every single song. So there's a lot of changes, there's a lot of differences, and there's a lot of the same elements sung in and sung out, but because they're coming from a different direction with a different purpose, they create a different result as far as the track is concerned. So you're going to have a lot of diversity out of the guitars, you're going to have a lot of diversity out of the bass, and then you're going to have some electronic elements that come in from different angles, creating different perspectives depending on where you are within the track and within the overall construction of this album. Sometimes these electronic elements come across almost industrial. Sometimes they come across more pop, dance sort of feel. So it's really hard for you to define exactly what they're doing because they're going to be doing different things depending on which song they're in. They're spread out throughout the record. They're not on every single track, but you can feel that they have a very predominant role in the overall soundscape. I just like the diversity that they offer. I like the heavier side of the electronic use. I'm not as much of a fan of the lighter side of the electronic use on this album. And then you have the guitars. The guitar is very diverse, but always executing with a lot of quality. That's one thing that you can hold on to, is that the execution and the playability of the guitar sounds phenomenal across each and every single song. It doesn't matter if in one song is a little bit more direct, if in one song is a little bit more driven, or if they're a little bit heavier, or if they're a little bit melancholic. The execution is always top notch, and that is one element that adds to the overall essence of the album, that adds to the overall essence of the songs. So the guitar playing is just outstanding from top to bottom. Same thing with the bass, not always in the forefront, not always letting the listener know that it's there. But when you hear it, you feel it, defining the boundaries, defining the structures of the songs, where the elements finish and where the elements start. The bass is playing such an important role on this record, a record that sometimes has so many layers that it's hard for you to divide them or know where one ends and where the other one starts. I always felt like the bass sound on this album helped define those layers a little bit better for the listener. It allowed you to understand what they were doing. It gave a little bit of oomph. It grounded the sound. It helped the drums as well. And it allowed the sound overall of this record to be a little bit more contained, even when it's super diverse and it's trying to break at the seams of these boundaries that have been created. On top of all of this, you have incredible vocals by Courtney. I think that goes without saying. Her voice on this album is outstanding across every single song. Her full range is at display from the first all the way to the last track. I think she can take it even further. The more she becomes comfortable, the more she becomes aware of her surroundings and what she can do as a vocalist, the more you're going to get out of her. But this album is just phenomenal from that perspective. Very emotional, very driven, melancholic, with a lot of different atmospheres, with a lot of different senses, with a lot of different results. And she always goes where the song needs to be. This is not a record where she determines where the songs are going or what the songs are doing because of her range. She's going whatever the song dictates her to go, and then she delivers what needs to be delivered in order to add value to the overall construction of the track. Almost like you would look at solos on a record, that the solos should be there to add value to the songs. She's doing the same thing but with her voice. That's her instrument, and she's using it to perfection across all 12 tracks. Just phenomenal delivery, phenomenal tone, phenomenal range, the emotion that she brings to the forefront, how she makes those lyrics feel like they're coming to life, like pages of the book that are becoming pieces of imagery in front of you. With the way she delivers is just phenomenal. Overall, this is a strong record, a record that has 12 individual singles, and that's really much how you have to approach this album. For me personally, I like an album to have a sense of a path, to have a sense of a journey. And when I look at metal records, I like records that have that sort of continuation, that offer me a feeling of following this red line all the way through. This album is built more like a pop record where the songs are a little bit disconnected from one another, but the quality of the individual songs is undeniable. So if you're listening to this album on playlists and a song is popping in here and there, you're going to have a great time listening to these songs because the strength of the individual tracks is undeniable. But for me to sit down and listen to this record is very cumbersome. I don't feel like it's an easy album to digest. It's not an easy album to process because you're making me reset and restart with every single song along the way. Now, when we talk about favorite tracks, I picked 3 songs outside of the singles, starting off with Sun Killer, opening track. It has a little bit of an electronic intro. It almost feels like a heartbeat, and it becomes the heartbeat of this song. And it has an incredible bass sound. This song really has a nice bass sound. It adds so much texture to how this whole track comes across. The guitars offer a lot of movement to the track itself, and the vocals really become the spotlight that ignites the song, and it becomes your focus as you progress through it. It has a little bit of a melancholic vibe from beginning all the way to the end. It feels like it's almost getting deeper and deeper into that melancholic world, allowing the vocals to stay very balanced throughout that melancholy all the way to the last third. In the last third, the track explodes, perhaps a little bit more vocally than musically, and you see that outburst of everything that was being bottled up on the inside. So great track, great construction, great way of morphing into something a little bit heavier at the end. Next, you have Yellowjacket featuring Sam Carter, a more electronic driven track, perhaps one of the most electronic driven tracks on this album. It adds heaviness, it adds aggression, both musically and vocally, because those electronic elements are impacting the sound and also impacting the vocals and how they come across. Very interesting blend of approaches, very interesting blend of vocals, of styles. A song that has a lot of aggression, and this aggression is always growing, is always brewing, is always moving forward. It really becomes the motor of the track itself. A track that feels like it's becoming heavier at every single turn, both musically and vocally. Last but not least, Silk in the Strings, a track that feels more direct. This is more to the point. It's a song that doesn't beat around the bush, that doesn't try to take you on a journey and make sure you see all the different sceneries within that journey. This is a track that's just straight to the point. It has a lot of heaviness. It doesn't hold back. It just comes at the listener with a lot of aggression. It feels very linear, both musically and vocally. There's not a lot of changes. There's not a lot of ebbs and flows. It's just aggression across all the different parameters, making it very explosive, an absolute banger of a track, and it's a short track. So because of all of these elements, because of the length of the song itself, it just feels like a very powerful track that comes in a burst. It hits you hard and then it moves on. This is it, Spiritbox with Eternal Blue, out September 17th on Rise Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Use the comment section below. I'll be reading those and getting back to you. Take care, guys.